holding, just gonna go back a second, the sugya of Matanos Lavyonim, finishing off the Mishnah. So hold on, let's bring up the page. Okay, so the Gemara was telling us about Matanos Lavyonim, which is the Gemara said the Mishnah we have Matanos Lavyonim. We have Matanos Lavyonim, and we have Mishloach Manos. The two gifts that we give to people, the two mitzvahs that we have on Purim is two of the mitzvahs of the few mitzvahs that we have. We have the Megillah, we have simcha, and we read the Torah on the Megillah. On Amalek. So we also have that we give gifts to the poor, and we send Manos, we send portions, each l're'eyu, a person to their friend. So the question is, the re'eyu it's not just like it's not a statement, just a general statement to be kind, to say that someone obviously is sending to your friend, but the re'eyu teaches us that it's a friend, and how friends gift each other is what we have to consider, because it's a gift to a friend. And what does it mean to gift a friend, and who has to gift a friend? So the Gemara told us that it means we're not going to do the Rashis and Reb Steinzatz again, but we will finish off the points that we were learning before. So the Gemara says that it is Tani Rabbi Yosef Mishalech Manis Ish L'Re'eyu. We send portions, a person to his one to another, or friend. Shtei Manis Ish Echad. You have to send two portions to one person. Matanos Lavyonim, gifts, plural, to poor people, plural. Shtei Matanos, two gifts to two people, which could be made to understand two gifts, meaning two gifts to each of the two people. But the Rashi says it means, like we said, Shtei Matanos l'shnei bnei Adam, the dai l'kol echad v'echad matana achas. You have to give each person, or it's enough to give each person one giving of Matanos, one gift to an Evya and to a poor person. The question is, of course, what is the definition of a gift, and what is the definition of a portion? Is a portion more than a gift, or is a gift more than a portion? It's not so clear. So a portion means that you're literally giving something to someone that the person should be able to use for hopefully for their meal, for their Yom Tov, because it's incumbent upon a person to have a meal on Purim to celebrate Simchas Yom Tov. So before we're going to go back to the Gemara, which tells us different stories. From these stories we learn halachas. We learn the laws of what does it mean to gift a person, and what kind of gift you give, and what kind of portions you have to send, and what happens if the person who you're gifting, who you're sending a portion to, also is a person that's poor. So you're actually helping the poor. Can you do two gifts? Could one person receive two of your obligations of Purim? Could you give a portion to a person and simultaneously fulfill your obligations to give a portion to a friend and to give charity, to give Matanos gifts to the poor? So before we get to that, we're holding in footnote number 239. I wanted to go through these footnotes because, again, these are footnotes of halacha, the law, because we're not studying a theoretical concept. Although we're studying the Talmud, it's not our halacha class, but there's no reason we shouldn't come to some sort of understanding, at least of the discussions of what is the obligations of Purim. So in footnote number 239, he says like this: the reason we do not recite a blessing on the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. Why don't we? He asked the question: why, if there's a commandment to do something, even if it's rabbinic, which the whole Purim is rabbinic, meaning the whole holiday is rabbinic. And even though we said that it's Ruach HaKodesh, it was said with the divine spirit, we talked about that, but nevertheless, it is a rabbinic holiday, like Rambam writes, and there's mitzvahs that are also rabbinic, but nevertheless, we make brachas. So why would we not make a bracha on an Erev, which is also rabbinic? So why would we not make a bracha when we specifically send the Mishloach Manos? Not just the bracha of Shechiyanu, which we say whenever a mitzvah comes around once in a while. But why do we say a bracha on the specific mitzvah of giving portions to a friend? So it's explained in the tshuva like this: because the mitzvah is to send a man to his fellow, ish l're'eyu. And who knows if they are truly fellow friends? to one another. So one person explains, I think citing the Sifsei Chachamim, right? That if the Torah is, again, this is why we have to use the wording specifically. Esther wrote, Matanos, Mishloach Manos ish l'reyayu. Part of the condition is not to send portions, but you send portions, a person to his friend. Now, making a blessing on that would mean to say that you are able to say with certainty that the person you choose to give portions to is your friend. It's very possible that you think you like that person, you think you're friends, and that the person doesn't feel friends. You don't understand your relationship. You think you're friends with that person, and therefore you decide to give that person Mishloach Manos. And the person, I've given as a yeshiva, we knocked on a door once to give Mishloach Manos to someone, and the person looked at us like, "What are you doing here? Like, it's Mishloach Manos is for friends. You're not on the list. You didn't make the list. So why are you giving us Mishloach Manos?" Mishloach Manos could create a kind of awkward situation. If you do get, you don't get. You're giving me a gift while you're not giving me a gift. So the Sifsei Chacham said you can't make a blessing because the definition means a man to his fellow friend, and who knows if they're truly friends to one another. He adds that perhaps this is also the reason no blessing is recited on gifts to the poor. So there's also a question. There's a famous shaila. Why don't we make a bracha before tzedakah? In general, why don't we give a bracha to tzedakah? A person gives tzedakah to someone, you should make a bracha. There's a lot of answers. One of the answers given is that if a person is going to sit there and have to make a bracha on tzedakah until you make all your preparations of making a bracha, the person's waiting there standing there needs the money. So it's not time to start getting involved in a blessing. But I think, but another question is over here specifically in Purim, when we give to the poor. So the reason is, since who knows whether the recipient is truly, this is possible that you're giving gifts to the poor, but the person who's receiving is not really poor, and therefore you wouldn't be made possible. You can't make a blessing on something that's not true. The Maharitz Chayot suggests another reason based on Rabbah. The Rabbah of Shlomo ben Aderet, he's a Rishon regarding charity. He says again the question that I asked: why don't we make a blessing before we give charity? Right? The Torah clearly says you have to give tzedakah. A poor person comes in front of you. You should say, whatever the finishing the blessing was, that I'm giving tzedakah. Al mitzvot tzedakah, right? Or litain tzedakah, whatever the wording would be. So why don't we make a bracha before we give tzedakah? So the Rashi says regarding charity, no blessing is recited because fulfillment is not entirely in the giver's control. If the poor person does not wish to accept, the mitzvah cannot be completed. So the Rashi writes why? Because it takes two. Right? There's an ani and a balabas. Again, these things that happen. I know I met there's people in Yerushalayim that collect money. So there was a person who always collects money. So I decided to take him to initiate. I met him on the way to the mikveh. So I decided to initiate and offer him tzedakah. He says, "Did I ask you for money? I didn't ask you for money. And not always could you give me money. When I'm ready to take tzedakah, I'll take tzedakah. When I'm not ready, then it's my private time, So he was offended by me offering him. So the Rashi writes. So the answer is given. There's two sides. There may be the person doesn't want to receive tzedakah. The later authorities explain that the point is not concerned that the person might refuse, but rather that for a mitzvah whose essence is to satisfy another's will, no blessing was instituted. Okay, so the Chassam Sofer writes another reason is because the receiver also has to be happy with what he receives or she receives. And many times, unfortunately, people say, "You didn't give me enough," or "That's all you give me." There's been situations where people are ungrateful. So, or maybe they're right. We're not judging here. But the point is that it takes the person has to receive it. It's not just that the person may not want to receive it. The person may not be happy with what they're receiving. So therefore, we don't make a bracha on tzedakah. Accordingly, the same would apply here with Mishloach Manos, as also written by the Pri Megadim. So there's also the Pri Megadim writes another point that again when you have Mishloach Manos, where the person has to receive, what happens if the person's not happy with what you bring? Let's say literally, right? You have what do they call potluck, right? Potluck meal, which is kind of what Mishloach Manos is really. If you get together and you have a meal, and someone comes and brings 2 cookies, then the other people that are joining the potluck will be a little offended. You didn't bring enough. You didn't bring your share. And there's actually halachas about this regarding shoshrinim when it comes to weddings. that when you there once upon a time, and the Rambam talks about this in the laws, there once upon a time there was ideas that that when people made a wedding, they expected the people that came at the wedding, close friends, would participate in the wedding, and you could actually take someone to court if you participated in their wedding and they didn't participate. You don't participate. They participate in your wedding, you don't participate back. You could demand and say you have to. You like if I give $100 towards your wedding, you have to give $100 towards my wedding. It's called shoshvinim, which means it's not just like a gift, a token gift. Where there's a kind of it's like Fiddler on the Roof. Everyone's bringing chickens to the wedding feast. So, however, there are rights that if one sends portions to his fellow and he does not wish to accept them, you bring Mishloach Manos to someone's door, and the person doesn't want to take it. He has nevertheless fulfilled his obligation. It doesn't say why the person doesn't want to accept it. It could be is either you're not my friend. I don't want you gifting me. You're not my friend. Not because what you gave isn't nice, but you're not my friend. Mishloach Manos means a person to the friend. You're not my friend. You shouldn't be gifting me. Or if the person says, I don't find this to be satisfactory, if you're gifting me, I would like to have something better. So then the Rabbah says it doesn't work like that. If you have to do your side, the person doesn't want to receive it. So he doesn't go according to what the Rashba. They want to use that the Rashba is saying that you don't know if the person's going to accept it or not. The Mishnah Brewer notes that the Pri Chodesh disagrees with the Chassam Sofer as question, and the Chassam Sofer questions this ruling. It means the Pri Chodesh and the Chassam Sofer disagree with Ramah. In response to the Chassam Sofer, it is explained that this depends on the reason for the mitzvah. According to the Matanos Alevi, the purpose is to increase peace and friendship. The reason why we give gifts portions to each other is to have unity and friendship. Contracting Haman's claim that the Jews are scattered and divided. One of the things that Haman said about the Jewish people are they're not friendly people. They're scattered and divided. They don't mingle. So we say, no, we do mingle. What are you talking about? We bring meals together. We eat together. So once one sends, he has demonstrated affection, and it does not matter if the recipient declines. Because I'm showing that I'm friendly. If the person doesn't want to accept my gifts, my portions, that's not my problem. But according to the Trumat Hadeshen, the purpose is to ensure there's ample food for Purim meal. Therefore, if the recipient refuses, one has not fulfilled the obligation. So if you're saying the idea is to show that we're friendly to each other, see, you can't say that I'm not friendly because you don't want to accept my gift. So then the Ramah is right. As long as the person gifts the next person, brings a portion, then you fulfill the mitzvah. Literally, I mean, if you're thinking about it on an extreme level, it can be very offensive. You can have a situation where someone thinks that they're friends with people, and whenever you knock on the door, people say, sorry, I don't want to take your Mishloach Manos. So did you fulfill the mitzvah? If you just put outside someone's door, did you fulfill the mitzvah? So if the reason is to show that there's a unity, so then it's enough. The Rabbah says it's enough. If the purpose is to the person's meal, so if you're adding to the person's meal, the Rabbah, then the reason is if the person says you're not adding to my meal, you didn't give me enough. You can't bring one cookie to my meal. I don't call that participation. The Chatan Sofer, which I believe is the son of the grandson of Chassam Sofer, writes that no blessing was instituted because the mitzvah expresses the general mitzvah of loving one's fellow, which applies at all times. Because it's not really a mitzvah on its own, but it's part of the mitzvah of love your fellow Jew, which is we have to do recha kamocha. We don't make a mitzvah on it because you have to do it all the time. On Purim, it was given a fixed enactment due to the publicizing the miracle. So in order to publicize the miracle, we do more Avos Yisrael, but it's all under the umbrella of the law of Avos Yisrael. We have to love your fellow Jew, which is constant. But it's not appropriate to recite a blessing, says the Chatan Sofer. The response of Rugat Habab writes that based on the Magen Avraham, suggests a general rule: the sages instituted blessings only where the act itself clearly indicates it is being done for a mitzvah. Where the act does not inherently demonstrate this, no blessing was recited. When we know clearly that what's happening now is a mitzvah, which tzedakah is, so then we fall back on the Rashba's answer of why we don't make a bracha for tzedakah, because it's not in your control. Maybe the person doesn't want to accept it, or the person is not happy with it, with the tzedakah. But when it comes to gifts, then in theory there should be a mitzvah, there should be a blessing, but it's not a mitzvah It's not clearly that it's a mitzvah. Why? Where Acts does not inherently demonstrate this, no blessings recited. Since spending portions and making a meal are actions done regularly on Shabbos and festivals, it's not only Purim that people eat in each other's houses. It's a normal thing in Yerushalayim. If you invite someone for a meal, a lot of the times they'll call up and say, "What can we bring?" We're bringing dessert. Bringing dessert is a form of Mishloach Manos, right? That's what the idea was. What we're getting at is according to some of the opinions, the idea is just pashut to sit together and do Purim together. So everyone does Purim together. That's something we do also in other times of the year. So it's not clear that this is a specific mitzvah for Purim. The act itself does not prove it is for the mitzvah, and therefore no blessings recited. So says the responsa. I think who was it? The Magen Avram. Okay. In the Maxis Bracha, it is written, one must give at least 2 gifts to poor people. If giving money, one must give enough for the recipient to purchase food equal to 3 eggs volume. Means you have to give the amount of 3 beitza. And that's how much you have to give for gifts to the poor. It means you can't give 25 cents because you can't buy anything with 25 cents. That's not fulfilling the mitzvah of Matanos Lavionim. If giving food, one must give bread equal to the value of 3 eggs. Accordingly, if one distributes to many poor people a small coin, a pruta to each, he has not fulfilled his obligation. A person may think, one second, I have $1,000 in my pocket, and I'm going to give out $100 to each person. If $1 is not enough to buy 3 eggs, then you haven't fulfilled your obligation of giving gifts to anyone. You haven't fulfilled the obligations. You gave tzedakah. You didn't fulfill your Purim obligation of gifts to the poor. So you have to be calculated to make sure that at least 2 poor people are getting the proper amount. Everyone else is considered tzedakah. But the actual mitzvah on Purim of Matanos Lavionim, according to the Machzik Bracha, is enough for them to buy a certain amount of food, which is 3 eggs worth. The Pri Chodesh asks, why not say that one must give 2 gifts to each person? All right. That's also, the way I understood the simple explanation of the Talmud was to give 2 gifts to 2 people, meaning to each person 2 gifts. All right, we're going to get back to these ideas in a second, but now let's go back to the Talmud where we're holding. So we're holding the story now, because this story the reason we kind of went out of our standard and to learn more to the halachic Talmud is because here we have to understand the stories. Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. Who's Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya? Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya was the grandson of Rabbi. Rabbi is the author of the Mishnah. He finishes the generation of the Tanaim, which means the rabbinic rabbis of the times of the Mishnah, starting really from his great-great-grandfather Hillel, the elder, and Shammai, going all the way down to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Then the family of Hillel were the Nisim, were the princes. He had a grandson. I think his son was Shimon, and Shimon had a son, Yehuda. So he was called Yehuda Nesiya, which is not Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, it's his grandson. So otherwise you could find him online as Rabbi Yehuda Nasi II. He sends a gift to his friend, Rabbi Oshia. Rabbi Oshia was also a great scholar in the times of Rabbi, also in Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya. What did he send him? He sends him Atma de Igla Tilta, the calf of the leg of a third-born calf. What's the definition of a third-born calf? Means the mother, the cow already had 2 calves before. This is the mother's 3rd calf. Evidently, I'm assuming that means it's a better quality meat. V'garba d'chamer, and a jug of wine. So this is what he sends him on Purim. Now the question is, what did he send him? Did he send him Matanos Lavionim, gifts to the poor, because Rabbi Oshia was very poor, or was he sending him Mishloach Manos, portions? So Rashi says that it was a calf, a leg of a calf that was the third born to the cow. All right, so let's turn the page. We're moving to page 7b. So he sends back. Rabbi Oshia says to Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya, "Kanta ba Rabbeinu." So, and he says, and the actual wording is that through us, our teacher has fulfilled both the obligations of Mishloach Manos Ish L'Re'eyu, sending portions, and Matanos L'Avionim, gives to the poor. Okay, so Rashi says like this. Rashi right away says, hold on. Can we say, Rashi's giving us, when Rashi writes, Hey Gimel means Hachigar Sinan, that Rashi had a different version of the Talmud. That Kaim Tebanu Rabbeinu Mishloach Manos L'Hatrei Manos Ika. That Rashi is coming to show us that you fulfilled your obligation of 2 portions. And what is Rashi telling us? That the wine, what did he send them? He sent them wine and a leg of meat. So he wants to show that you fulfilled your obligation because you sent 2 manas. The wine was considered food. Because a person may say, is liquids food? Is wine, which is a special liquid, considered food? Right? So can you send a bottle of wine and a piece of meat? Is that Mishloach Manos? So Rashi says that's what he was telling him. That he was telling him that you gave me 2 portions. But the Talmud actually says that he fulfilled 2 obligations. He fulfilled sending portions and the gifts to the poor. So we'll see the different opinions. So he says like this, right away Reb Steinsaltz teaches us, in the Jerusalem Talmud, and the Shiltos, which is a kind of a variant of the Talmud, has a variant reading of the incident is cited. First, Rabbi Yehuda means the Jerusalem Talmud tells us the story has a little bit more than meets the eye. Why? The first Rabbi Yehuda Nesiah, Rabbi Yehuda II, sent a small gift. He sent a much smaller gift. What did he send them? A small piece of meat with a smaller portion of wine. And Rabbi Osha responded that he had fulfilled the mitzvah of gifts to the poor. So from here we see that gifts to the poor is less than 2 portions. Means there's a thing that Rambam brings down in halacha when it comes to the law, that when someone has to analyze what you should spend your money and efforts on Purim, some people will spend it on Mishloach Manos, how much gifts you're going to give. Some people will focus on their meal or their Purim party. The Rambam says you should be focused on gifts to the poor. That should be your primary focus when it comes to Purim. But so according to the Jerusalem Talmud, he sent a smaller amount, and he said to him, you fulfilled your obligation of gifts to the poor, meaning you haven't really sent a portion yet because you sent me kind of very cheap things. That's only gifts to the poor. But if we were really friends, you'd send me something nicer. Therefore, he sent a more substantial gift when he got the message that it wasn't enough. So he sent a second gift, which was the third leg, the leg of a third-born cow, and a jug of wine versus a cup of wine. And Rabbi Osha responded, and now he has to fill and send and give portions to one another. In other words, a gift that one sends to one another who is his equal, should be nicer. That means, we're going to learn from this Gemara that a lot of times kind of, in my 20 plus years in marriage, there's been waves of how people approach Shalach Manos. In the first, sometimes people get very elaborate Shalach Manos, and then people get very casual about Shalach Manos. Very, I guess when you get, okay, whatever, we're just going to give a few hamantashen and a small glass of wine, or a small bottle of wine, or we're going to send a bottle of beer and 3 hamantashen. So clearly, this story, according to the Jerusalem Talmud, is the idea of gifts, portions to each other should be something more of substance, of a show that you're actually sending something nice. So he said until he sent him the jug of wine and the leg of the third-born cow, he was saying like you gave gifts to the poor, but that's not something you would send to a friend. Okay, and in other words, some explain, according to Rashi's reading, that this incident comes to teach us that one can fulfill both mitzvahs by giving to one person. I'm not sure where he gets this from. Reb Steinsaltz gets this from Rashi, because Rashi actually seems to show us the opposite. That Rashi is not including the idea of gifts to the poor. He's just talking about Mishloach Manos. But according to the literal Talmud, the fact that he gave both Rabbi Oshia both gifts to the poor and Mishloach Manos means you could give the same person both things. The question only is, according to the Jerusalem Talmud, he gave him 2 times. First time he gave him a smaller gift, and he said, okay, now you gave me, that was gifts to the poor. If you want to be my friend, then you have to give something else. So then he gave a second giving, which was the third leg of a third born cow and a jug of wine. So he gave two givings. The question is if you could give one giving, and that would be fulfilling the laws of portions to a friend and gifts to the poor. Turi Evan, others learn from here that wine and not only food is also considered a portion. Okay, so we can learn three things. One is that gifts to the poor is less than seemingly less than portions to a friend. Second point is that you could give possibly to one person both. And the third thing is that wine, I'm not going to say liquids, but wine is considered kosher, good for Mishloach Manos. Beer would be another question. Beer is not as important, of course, as wine. Okay, just a few more commentaries over here. It says there's a question. Those days you would give, like for the roof. I gave 3 chickens. So what happens if you give someone a chicken without, either before slaughtering, after slaughtering, or a chicken ready to be slaughtered? And that's your gift. That's portions. That's your gift. That's portions. That's your portion to a friend. Now the friend goes and either he himself or he hires a shochet, a slaughterer, and he slaughters it, and he finds out the chicken wasn't kosher. It's just that all chickens are kosher. Do you fulfill your obligation of giving a portion to a person? If the person finds out, that means when you gave it, you had no way of knowing. If you buy non-kosher food from a supermarket, would be something different because you should have known better, know the laws of checking what's kosher. But you buy a chicken, you don't know if the chicken's kosher or not. No one knows until you slaughter it. You have to check if it has a treifa. If it's a treifa, at the end of the day, the person can't eat it. Did you fulfill your obligation of giving a portion to another person if the person can't eat it? So they want to prove from our Gemara that if you think it's kosher and you only find out later that it's not kosher for halachic reasons, then you still fulfill your obligation because the fact that Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya sent I don't know I'm not gathering exactly the proof because a leg of a lamb, it's obviously after slaughtering and hopefully after they check the animal being kosher. It's not proof if you give a chicken that the chicken doesn't, and we're assuming he gave him a raw leg of a lamb that still had to be cooked. Okay, so that's another question. If you could give uncooked food as portions, okay. The question over here is not everyone. Rabbi Steinsaltz kind of laid out this story of Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya and Rabbi Oishia. Kind of a few things. Number one is going backwards. Wine is okay. Number two is you could give one person both gifts. If you learn that our Gemara is talking about that he said you did both mitzvahs. And number three is that you could give that Mashach Manos is larger than Matanos Lavyonim. Now we learned before the opinion that Matanos Lavyonim has to be 3 eggs. But Mishloach Manos, we're going to see a person is okay to be offended if you don't gift enough. Again, this happens all the time. This has to be. It's not something. It's still in 3,000 years we haven't really figured this out of Mishloach Manos. We're still figuring it out. People get offended, or people get offended if they do get. They don't get what they get, how much they got. Well, I gave you such a beautiful one. Look what you gave me back. There's so that's not new. That was going on in the times of the Talmud. And we were still having, Rabbi Oishia sent him a message according to the Jerusalem Talmud. I just wanted to let you know that if you think you fulfilled your obligation of portions to a friend, you gave me a lousy piece of meat and a cup of wine. That's gifts to the poor. And basically also he was saying, if Rabbi Oishia was poor, he was also offended. It's the question is also how do you gift to the recipient? If the recipient's poor, the recipient is offended by getting a small gift, thinking that I would be happy with just a small portion because anything is good. Where if I was giving a gift to my rich friend, I couldn't get away with just giving a simple gift, so I'm going to have to give a nicer gift. Rabbi Oishia was calling foul on that. He says it doesn't work like that. Even if I'm your friend, even if I'm a poor person, so then if you're giving me a poor person's gift, then you're giving me the next guy, because Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya was a rich person. He was the Nasi, right? He was the head of the Jewish people. He was a prince by definition. He was a very wealthy person. So Rabbi Oishia was offended by his initial gift, which was small. Okay, I just want to bring on a few more halachos. It says that not everyone agrees, by the way, with how we work it we'll have to read all the details. Maybe we'll get back to it if we finish enough. We'll go back to this piece. But according to some opinions, actually, Mishloach Manos, Matanos Avyanim should be more than Mishloach Manos. And how we viewed rich versus poor is also a question. Let's get back to this if we have time later. Okay, now we have another case. Rabbah is later. Rabbah is a few generations later. He doesn't live. The story of Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya and Rav Oishia happens in Eretz Yisrael, in Tveria, in Sipori. So that's in the north. Rabbah lives in Babylonia. Him and Rabbi Yosef are the great, I think, the third generation of Talmudic scholars. So it's later. And Rabbah is also becomes head of the yeshiva. So he becomes the head of the yeshiva, Pumbedisa. So he gets elevated to the Rosh Yeshiva. So Rabbah Shabbalei Limori Barmar, a person called Mori Barmar. I'm not sure if that's his whole name or if it's Mori Barmar Baravhuna or what have you. So he sends a gift on Purim, a Mishloach Manos, a portion to Mori Barmar. Who does he send? Like we learned last week, the mitzvah is to send Mishloach Manos, not to give it yourself. So he sends it with his nephew, Abaya. Abaya, the famous Abaya and Rabbah, Abaya was a nephew of Rabbah. His mother, he was raised, I think, by his stepmother. They all died young because they were all, I believe, Kohanim. So they died young. I think Oshia also, by the way, was also a Kohen. So they all died young because they were descendants of Eli the high priest, and there was a curse on the house of Eli that they wouldn't live long. So Abaya and Rabbah are students of Rabbah. So Rabbah sends his nephew Abaya to deliver a Shalach Manos. What does he send? He sends Mori Taska de Kashva. He sends a sack full of dates. Umole Kasa Kimcha de Avshuna. And he sends a cup full of roasted flour kernels, like popcorn or something they would eat those days. It was like a sweet delicacy of like kernels that were cooked in some sort of, possibly, that was like a snack. Basically, he sends him snacks. He sends him dates, and he sends him kernels. So Barry tells his uncle, listen, this guy's going to be offended by the gift. Hashta and Mary Bamar is going to say, that he's going to say he was basically, Rabbah was a poor person. And Rabbah became the head of the Pumbedisa, head of the yeshiva. Once he becomes head of the yeshiva, he's not the person he once was. Now he's head of the yeshiva. He has to view himself as the head of the yeshiva. Pumbedisa wasn't just the yeshiva. There was two main yeshivas that were in Bavel. Pumbedisa was a high position. That was like the head of that means you were basically the spiritual head of Bavel. So he says that Mary is going to say, that if a farmer becomes the king, the basket does not descend from his neck. You're still giving me a farmer's gift. Now you're the king. You're supposed to give a king's gift. What are you sending me? What are you sending such a cheap gift for? Basically, why? It's not. You have to. If you upgrade in life, got to upgrade how you live and how you send things. So these are all lessons, right? So that Taska de Kashva Sakmar Itmar. He sends a bag full of dates. The Avshuna, Rashi says that he took kernels from they would cook the kernels of the wheat in an oven, when there's still kernels, and it becomes sweet. So I think what happens is, not that it becomes a candy, but then you once it's cooked in a way that when you do mill the kernels and make it into flour, it's like a sweet flour. So Abba says to Rabbah, Hashta Amimar, Achshav Yemer Mori Alecha. Mori Bamar is going to say about you, you're still giving a cheap person's gift. If a farmer becomes a king, he never takes his basket away from his neck. This basket that you had when you were still a villager, you're a poor person. And you're using the basket to feed your animals. You didn't take it off your head. You're a king. king has to dress like a king. Stop walking around with your animals basket. Kach ata nasis melech, you became a king. V'reish pumudisi, the head of the yeshiva. And you're just sending a common gift. So we see from this story again that it's not so simple. It's not so simple. Gifts, portions, again, it's of the most challenging things around Purim is how to know what it means to give Mishloach Manos. What does it mean? So it's a statement about you as well. It's not just a statement about the mitzvah. If you're a person of means, or a person that has a position, it's not an honor to your position to belittle the mitzvah and send Mori Bar a snack. You now the Rosh Hashiva, send them something of substance. So Rav Steinzat says that see the Re'ei Dunim, which elaborates and explains in detail that this story is not merely a series of light-hearted comments, but also teaches several practical halachas concerning sending portions to Purim. See, that he says over here that by sending, first of all, Mori Bar was a wealthy person, evidently, and Rabbah now is a wealthy person. Mishloach Manos Tavyonim means sending portions, person to his friend means, how do you view me? Also, by the way, before the story of, according to the whole discussion that we'll get back to about what do you give larger, gifts to the poor or Mishloach Manos, is a question of, does a person, we talked about this last week, should a person wait to be gifted by, sometimes we overestimate our relationships with people, like we said before. So let's say the rabbi of the shul. Do you wait for the rabbi to send you? Should Rabbi send you first, or do you send the rabbi first? In the story of Rabbi Nasiya and Rabbi Aishia, Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya was the Nasi. And Rabbi Aishia was, even though he was a great scholar, was maybe the student. So maybe Rabbi Aishia waited for Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya to send, because you shouldn't assume that the Nasi is your friend. You shouldn't assume that the rabbi is your friend. If the rabbi sends you, then you return. And other people learn the opposite. That Rabbi Aishia was greater than Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya. And therefore Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya sent him first. All right. But in this case, Rabbah sends to Rabbi Mori Bar, and the Rabbi as the nephew and the messenger doesn't feel comfortable. Okay, so what did he bring in that from the Latin? It's okay. These are just explaining the foods he gave him. That according to Rashi and others commentaries, the term refers to dry roasted grain. The Gaonim disagree and explain that it is reference to moist grain or barley. Okay, different types of grain-based granolas or something. Okay, so what happens? It doesn't say here that Rabbah changed his gift. Abaye just made a comment and got on his way to deliver the Mishloach Manos. So he delivers the Mishloach Manos to Mori Bar. What does Mori Bar send back to Rabbah? So he sends him back a sack full of ginger, and he sends him a cup full of long peppers. So he sends dates and some sort of granola snack, and he sends back ginger and these long peppers. Abaye, so now Abaye is again, he's the messenger. He has something to say about every time he gets a job, he has a comment. So Abaye answers back now to Mori Bar. Hashta Mar, now my master, my uncle Rabbah is going to say, I sent him a sweet gift, and he sends him back peppers that are sharp and ginger is sharp. So we see that again there was these hidden messages in the foods. The foods were all the word, actually, some people say the word mari is from the word mar, bitter. So, and Rabbah, so it could be that he was kind of indicating that I'm a bitter person, because he sent back peppers or zingvel. Either way, we see that the gifts were more than just the gifts. So the lesson obviously from this is to be careful and not offensive, and kind of considerate, and have to have a kind of a bigger picture of how we approach Purim going forward, as far as gifting our friends, as far as gifting the poor. And also maybe Bishrosalim, maybe it's not exactly a great idea to be too sensitive either. But either way, so Abaye sends back that Rabbah is going to be offended by his gift. Rashi says, "Chuli matika." I sent something sweet, and Rabbah sent you sweet, and you sent back sand curd from the sand curd, so long peppers. Now, Abaye said in this incident he described, what happened was evidently, still, even though Rabbah becomes the head of the yeshiva Pumadisa, and Abaye felt that he didn't gift accordingly. There's people today that Baruch Hashem blessed a lot of people to become wealthy fast. Technology and things like that. So a lot of people that they don't know how am I supposed to up my game when I become wealthy? Like, how do I drive? What car do I drive? What plane do I take? What do I fly? First class, business class, private jet? Am I allowed to just go to anywhere? Do I show up in what kind of car do I take? When do I start getting a driver? When do I shop in these stores? When do I start offering different foods? Like, how do I know to up my social game? So people don't know. So you have advisors. People actually have their job is to advise people. I once read someone that's their job. They advise the rich and famous. What does it mean to be rich and famous? How am I supposed to be rich? How do I live as a rich person? I don't know. How much do I tip now? What am I supposed to do? What's a normal gift to someone now? So Bible is basically telling Rabbah that you haven't learned, you haven't adjusted your social situation because your social situation changed. You haven't adjusted your gifts. Now Abaye is still, nevertheless, Rabbah evidently was still very poor because Abaye had some sort of meal by Rabbah. Now he's coming to Mori Bar Mar, so he kind of joins the meal here too. So Amar Abaye, kinafik mi Bar Mar have a savannah. When I left my master's house, meaning his uncle Rabbah, he thought he was full, and he was just going to deliver the Mishloach Manos. Kimati lahasa, when he comes to Mori Bar Mar's house to deliver the Mishloach Manos, evidently, Mori Bar Mar was a very wealthy person. So he served him 60 plates of 60 kinds of cooked dishes. Even if it's exaggerated, his point is that all of a sudden he comes from, eating some chicken wings and a piece of challah and having a glass of wine. He walks into this huge feast where they're serving him many dishes with many types of foods. And he thought he was full, but then he realized, he ate all 60 portions. I ate all 60 portions from each of them, and the last dish, that they served me, his last dish was pot roast. I wanted to chew the plate afterwards. Okay, what we learn about in the Talmud that people are maybe not accustomed to is that the Talmud is very real and very true. A lot of times, some people maybe uncomfortable to talk about subjects. The Talmud, there's no subject the Talmud won't discuss, and there's no emotion or feeling that's petty for the Talmud to talk about. And here we have a Abaye he was an orphan, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Because Amali Imi, I believe he had a stepmother. So he's raised by his uncle Abaye, Rabbah. He thinks he's like that poor kid who thinks he's full, and then he goes to the rich person's house. He realizes he's starving, and he eats all 60 portions. And he's so hungry, he says that even after the pot roast, he wants to eat the plate. Now, what does this mean? That's like the statement. So there's a lot to read into the statement. One of the statements is that we learn that sometimes a person doesn't even realize when they're poor that they're really hungry. The poor don't even realize that they're hungry. Only when they start eating. Another thing is that it's the whole discussion was not about food, but it's about Torah. That he thought he was satisfied with Torah by his uncle Rabbah, and then he went to Mori Bar Mar's table and he started to hear, really great ideas, and he realized that he didn't, there's so much more to learn. So Rashi says like this: Kinafik mi Bei Bar Mar, when I left my house of my uncle, Leinach lebeis Abba Mori Bar Mar. I don't know what Abba Mori Bar Mar means. Abba, the father Mori Bar Mar, or Abba Bar Mar is his name. But either way, Mori Bar Mar, Haisi Sava, I thought I was full. They fed him, they offered him 60 different dishes. Even after I ate 60 portions, when I had the pot roast, I wanted to eat the plate afterwards. What does it mean? It's not a normal. He really ate a lot. So Reb Steinzal says the Orach explains that pot roast is a meat that is roasted without water inside a pot in a manner similar to frying. Okay, so Reb Steinzal is telling us how we make pot roast. We make pot roast in a pan that's a dry cook. All right. Omar Abaya, so Abaya says, from this I learned that when I thought I went full to Mori Bar Mar's house, and I realized how starving I really was, this is what people say, Kofin Aina V'layada, the poor man is hungry and does not know. I didn't even know that I was hungry. I thought that I was full until I went to this big feast. Another thing people say, Ravcha Levisama Shechiach, that alternatively we could learn that there's room for sweets is always found. Meaning, you go out with people. I go out sometimes with people, and you go out to. I'm finished. I can't put another piece of food in my mouth. Okay, what's for dessert? So you just said you're starving and you can't. You're so full you can't put another piece of food in your mouth. Now you're asking for dessert. Which one is it? Because Rabbi says that for sweet there's always room. You think you're full, but now I went to Bar Mar's house. I get that was considered sweets, and therefore there's always room in your stomach for extra sweet food. For something sweet, there's always space in your stomach. No one's going to turn down a good piece of chocolate cake, no matter how full you are from the main meal. So you want dessert. I always wondered, because I'm not like that. If I'm full, I'm full. I don't have dessert. But some people always have room for dessert. Okay, so Abai says there's always room for dessert. Okay, the Gemara continues. We're going to continue. We'll finish to the Mishnah, and if we have room, we'll go over some of the laws, because we finished the subject once we finished to the Mishnah. Abba bar Avin and Rab Chanina bar Avin. These are two people that are evidently brothers, because they're both sons of Avin. So Abaya the son of Avin and Rab Chanina the son of Avin. Now, what does that mean? That they would exchange meals. That could mean two things. Meaning exchange meals is literally, here's one and here's your one. They were both very poor. So they had to have Seudah Yom Tov, and they have to fulfill their obligation of giving a portion to a friend. So how do you do it both? If you don't have to, if I'm going to give a portion to a friend, then I'm not going to have anything to eat. So the two brothers would give each other. You give me your meal, I'll give you my meal. I have what to eat, you have what to eat. At the same time, we fulfill the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. But Rashi says that's not what happened. Rashi says, because that's where you can learn what happened. So Rashi says no. Rashi says the machlifi Seudah that they had, again, what we're learning about this is, the point is that there's a lot of, this Gemara has a lot of messages. There's the laws, there's the attitudes, there's how we view friendship, this is how we gift each other's friends. What does it mean? There's a lot that we can learn from this Gemara, how, each person could open their minds and imaginations of what lessons we can learn. But one other thing is that the underlying point is that Purim is a holiday of friendship. And Purim is a holiday that friends should be together. And what Rashi is saying is that they could have eaten meals alone. But every year they would instead eat at each other's houses. One year you eat in my house, next year in mine. So we should do the meals together. So the idea was that to show that Purim is a time to eat together with other people, not to just sit at home alone and have a meal. Purim is a time that it's we see from Abba bar Avin and Rab Chanina bar Avin that the brothers would get together every year. One year in my house, the next year in your house. So Reb Steinzal says that the Ram explains simply. So that, again, like I said, there's two understandings of how we should understand the story. So the Ram, Rabbi Nissen, says that the two sons of Rab Avin, they're both sons of Rab Avin, were poor. And consequently, they fulfilled their obligation of exchanging meals. So they were able to eat meals and exchange meals at the same time. Many later authorities explain that according to the opinion of Rashi, by eating the Purim feast together, they enhance the joy of Purim. The Rashi learns differently, that part of simcha Yom Tov, part of the simcha of Purim, is to not eat alone your meal, but you should eat it with other people. Machlifu Seudah, they would switch meals. So he says like this: one who lacks the means to send portions to another may share a meal with another, and thereby they both fulfill the obligation. So the Shulchan Aruch 695, which is the halacha, the law quotes based on this story, that you could switch meals. He kind of puts together all the opinions. Switch meals and eat together. If we bring food together to a meal, That's both Mishloach Manos and Simchas Yom Tov. Because we're eating together, that means bringing portions to each other. I'm not gonna. It's not that I bring my chicken to your house and you eat my chicken. I eat my chicken, you eat your chicken. We're gonna put all the food on the table, and now that's the meal. So even though I can eat my meal alone, or I can eat together with you, and I'm not getting more food because we're just same. There's each one's bringing X amount. But the fact that we're eating together and sharing portions, that's Mishloach Manos. Okay. Now we're finishing off with the complicated question of the Talmud that talks about the laws of drinking on Purim. We all know that the laws of drinking on Purim is obligatory. The question is what that means. Rabbah says, again, Rabbah is the colleague of Abaya, who are the students of Rabbah. We're going to go back to Rabbah in a second, their teacher. A person must become intoxicated on Purim until, to the extent that you do not know the difference between Or Haman and Baruch Mordechai. You do not know the difference between cursing Haman, which should be obvious to you, and blessing Mordechai, which means that you totally don't know what's going on. That's how drunk you have to become on Purim. So Rashi says, what's Rashi say? Rashi teaches us, you have to drink enough wine until you don't know the difference between blessing Mordechai and cursing Haman. We're going to learn a story about this. I'm going to learn a little bit of the law about this. Tosfos writes, the letter between Or Haman and Baruch Mordechai. So in Jerusalem it says, you don't know the difference between Arura Zeresh and Brucha Esther. Arurim Kol Yerusha and Bruchim Kol Yehudim. The Tosfos is saying, the question is, what's Tosfos really adding? Tosfos says, it's not just that you don't know the difference between blessing Mordechai and cursing Haman. You also don't know the difference between cursing Zeresh. Zeresh was the wife of Haman, and blessing Esther, Queen Esther. And you don't know the difference between blessing all the wicked people, blessing all the good people, the Jewish people, and cursing all the wicked people. But obviously, there's that, and Tosfos was adding a level of drunkenness. If I just am confused between Haman and Mordechai, but I'm clear between Zeresh and Esther, is that another level of drunkenness? Or Arum Kol Yisrael, Bruchim Kol Yehudim? Obviously, Tosfos is telling us something a little deeper than that. What it is, we have to each one analyze on our own. Okay. So the Rabbi Steinsaltz now going to give us a little insight to the law. There are many different explanations to this halacha. I mean, how intoxicated you have to get. The Rabbah says you have to get intoxicated till you don't know the difference between cursing Haman and blessing Mordechai. The Rabbah, Maimonides, explains that one must drink until he falls asleep. Then you drink until you fall asleep. Because of sleep, you're not going to know the difference between Mordechai and Haman from wine, and will then be unable to differentiate between Haman and Mordechai. Okay, if you fall asleep, then you don't know. Tosfos, based on the Jerusalem Talmud, explains that after reading the Megillah, it was customary to recite several passages related to the characters mentioned in it: Zeresh, Esther, Mordechai, Haman. And some say that the entire poem was read. So says the Rishash. A person will be unable to recite these texts correctly if he's intoxicated, or will confuse male and female, singular and plural formulations. Meaning, what Tosfos was adding is our question. What Tosfos is adding is that you're not reading it properly, and you're not knowing how to say the plural versus the singular, the woman versus the man versus the woman. Kind of, you're confused. The Matanos explains that one will be unable to distinguish between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai when he hears it. There are several other explanations for this obligation. One is that one becomes numerological value. One is that because the number value is equal, they're both 200 and 402, I think it was 402 or 502. The number value is 502, I think. So exactly, Baruch Mordechai and Or Haman is the same number value. One is cursed Haman and blessed Mordechai, and one is required to drink until you can no longer make that calculation. Okay, you can never come up. You're too drunk to be able to calculate the Hebrew numbers that make up blessed Haman and blessed Mordechai and cursed Haman. Others explain that this is an allusion to the fact that one should drink until he's unable to distinguish even between the geometric opposites. It means Haman and Mordechai, total opposites. Yet another opinion is that one should drink until he forgets his troubles and the hatred that exists between people, so that it is as if the rancor and struggles between Haman and Mordechai are forgotten as well. Okay, so different opinions of how drunk you have to get. Does it mean to fall asleep? Does it mean not to be able to distinguish between Nam and Mordechai, or figure out the number value, or to know your hate for people? You stop hating people, you're a little relaxed. Now he's going to quote the halacha, the Mishnah Brewer. He says, one is obligated to become taxer at Purim until he's unable to distinguish between cursed Haman and blessed Mordechai. In accordance with the opinion of Rabbah, some maintain that in the wake of the incident involved Rabbah and Rabbi Zeira, which we're going to learn about in a second, the halacha is no longer in accordance with Rabbah's opinion, and one drinks only a bit more than he's accustomed to drink. So says the Taz, citing the Beis Yosef and Rabbeinu Ephraim. So we're going to learn a story in a second that happened. People drink too much. So people drink too much, it could cause damage. And therefore, now we don't have that obligation to drink that much. Some maintain that one should drink until he falls asleep, which like we said before, at which point he no longer is able to distinguish between Haman and Mordechai because you're sleeping. If one damages another in the course of Purim festivals, some hold that is exempt the obligation to pay. The Ramah says if you cause damage on Purim because the halacha says you have to get drunk, and in your drunkenness you cause damage, then you're not obligated to pay. If the damages are substantial, the custom is not to exempt him. Okay, so says the Mishnah Brewer. We have a few minutes. Let's just learn the story. Let's get. I want to know 4 minutes. I'll get to the question in a second. Rabbah and Rabbi Zeira avdu Seudah Purim b'had yadad. Rabbah and Rabbi Zeira did a Purim Seudah together. So Rabbah, this is the version that we have here. Rabbah, not Rabbah. So Rabbah, the uncle of Abaya, the teacher of Rabbah, and Rabbi Zeira made a Seudah, a Purim meal together. Ibasum, they became intoxicated, they drank. Come Rabbah shachti Rabbi Zeira. The literal translation is Rabbah came and slaughtered Rabbi Zeira in his drunkenness. The next morning he realized that he seemingly killed his friend Rabbi Zeira, and he prayed to God and he had a resurrection. He was alive again. The next year, he said, Naisi Marvin Avitu this Purim Hadiyadad, let's make a meal again. So Rabbi Zeira says, no, thank you. Last year you killed me and then you prayed to God and God brought life back to me. That maybe what happens if this year you're going to kill me and God won't listen, won't make a miracle. So obviously this story is not literal that Rabbi killed Rabbi Zeira, or if it is literal, there's different explanations. The Rabbi has a very beautiful talk that he kind of elevated him. Rabbah was the word Rabbah means huge. Zeira means small. So Rabbah was much greater than Rabbi Zeira in study of Torah. Maybe this is before Rabbi Zeira went to Eretz Yisrael. So Rabbah goes to elevate Rabbi Zeira. Shachat means to mashach. He elevated him to his spiritual level, and that was overwhelming for Rabbi Zeira. So therefore, he had to pray for him to be able to come back to himself. That's why he said, not every year is a miracle. I'd rather be in my small space than your large space. The Rebbe has a beautiful talk. There's many talks about this Gemara, but the literal translation is that he killed him. So he slaughtered him, and he prayed, and God made a miracle and resurrected him. And therefore, the next year he said, no, thank you, because whatever happened last year, I don't want it to happen again. And therefore, let's just, we'll eat meals separately or find other company to join our meals, not each other. Yes, Aaron.
Okay, I got 2 questions. My first question is, I'm giving an example of one of my friends. I'm not going to give names or anything, but he is a rabbi. He teaches in yeshivas, and he makes, let's just say, over $100,000. But in Brooklyn, he breaks even at the end of every month for sending his kids to yeshiva and paying his bills. He's not extravagant in anything, but he enjoys his life.
Okay.
What's his status? Poor, rich, whatever. And my second question is, okay, I've been at Purim parties that last until the service. If I was to drink and get, intoxicated, so I don't know the two, like the question you asked, well, now I'm going to be into service and you're not allowed to be drunk while you're in a service.
Okay, there's both excellent questions about, because this is a question that's discussed in halacha about when it comes to davening. It's a famous thing that's brought down that Ma'ariv and Purim sometimes becomes it becomes a weak situation because of after drinking, so you have to be careful. And it's a good question. Do you go back? These are all good questions. I don't want to answer the first or the second question. The first question is, it really depends. You have to. This is where you have community charities that could see if a person's allowed to take charity or not, if based on living a certain standard of living, that they still need more.
But I'm
So
not asking that question, if he could take charity or not. I'm asking, what's his status for giving the gifts? Because he makes, in some communities, that would be,
what are you saying? Okay, then listen. Again, gifts to you're talking about portions to each other. If you're talking about portions to each other, like what you give to your friends. Again, what we see from this whole Gemara is there has to be certain social intelligence of Purim, and again, it's not an easy holiday because, like I said last week, there are those who get that actually Purim is a hard holiday because they don't get gifts, no one's knocking on their door, and it's so first of all, be sensitive to that. You don't have to say, something with a measuring stick and measure, is this person really my friend? Do I really have to give them shachmanis? If you know that you could make someone happy, giving them shachmanis, if you go to hell for giving someone shachmanis who didn't deserve that, you're in a good place in life. So,
okay, I'm going to say this so that you have a little context. He gives gifts, he gives nice ones, but they're modest. They're not anything extravagant like some people would do. And I give him gifts. We're good friends. So he does what he can, but I'm just asking because, someone would say in the Jewish world, you try to bring up as many kids as you can, be fruitful and multiply, and that takes a toll on your expenses, especially if you send to yeshivas.
listen, I hear what you're saying. I think there has to be a certain social intelligence, and there also has to be at the same time, there's a lot of social pressures that you don't have to have social pressures. There has to be a balance. What we're learning from this is there's a balance, right? There's a balance means that there has to be a balance. Rabbi Yehuda Messiah send a leg of a cow and a jug of wine, and Rabbah and Mori Barma were sending, dates and dates and ginger. So and in the meantime, Mori Barma was serving a meal of 60 meals, and then he sends. The Gemara tells us that Rabbah was sending a cheap gift. I don't know how much ginger cost in those days. I can't imagine ginger was gold, and long peppers were gold. So he has 60 dishes, but he's sending back ginger and peppers. There's a certain social intelligence we have to have, and also there has to be a limit on social pressures when it comes to Purim as well. You don't have to do something because of social pressure. So you have to find your happy space where you're comfortable with what you're doing, and at the same time also be very sensitive to others. Especially, I think the real mitzvah from Purim would be to include people and not to exclude people, and to make people feel better about themselves and not worse. I just want to read this one last note before we finish, and then we have to stop.
What about the drinking and the praying?
I don't want to answer that right now because it's a little bit more complicated about there's more to the halachas. Maybe we'll get back to we didn't do all the footnotes on that part. We'll get back to maybe next week. But let's just finish this case over here. Both early and later commentators wonder about this incident. Some explain that slaughter shchita in this case would read squeezed. In his joy, Rabbah embraced Reb Zeira, not that he took out a knife and killed him. So powerful that he fainted. And then he davened and he got better. The Mishloach explains that Rabbah forced Reb Zeira to drink excessively until he became weak and fainted. So either he made him drink too much or he hugged him too hard. The Rebbe tells it that he brought him in a level of kedusha very high. But whatever it was an overwhelming experience for Reb Zeira that he survived and would rather not do it again next year. All right, everyone. Laila Tov, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Rabbi.